Just think all the time you finger fuck with all these people. It should be known what they know their tasks. So none of your people deserve a bonus.
Well, of course they don't deserve a bonus, but I was, how can I penalize them? I mean, if, in case they don't get the...
You fire them. It's very simple. These are the expectations. These are the absolutes and deliverables. Do they have deliverables in Germany?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. These are the deliverables. If you don't give me the deliverables, 100% of the deliverables, bonus, promotion. 80% of the deliverables, bonus. Below 80% of the deliverables, fired. You guys don't make anything mandatory. You don't even make coming to fucking work mandatory. Death, fucking coma, remember? That's it. You're death. You're coma. I've had people in Britain leave their wife in labor. I'm not suggesting this for the tape. Leave their wife in labor to make a meeting. Fortunately for him, his wife had a long labor, so he was able to get back before the kid was born. In labor. In Edinburgh. Now, it was a life-death situation for the company. We had to have the financing. He knew it. I knew it. I was in, where was I? I forget where I was. I was someplace on the other side of the world. And he knew, even though the lawyers, and we had one of the biggest law firms in Scotland, the lawyers knew what was supposed to be doing, the accountants, but there had to be a principal there, just to make sure to nudge the deal along. And he left, and he just prayed. And he's not a very religious guy. He prayed, get back to the hospital, and he was there. So, for his child to be born. I had another guy who was supposed to get married on the 5th. We had a board meeting here on the 2nd. He had to make a presentation to the board. The board meeting ran over, and it wound up to be, so he wasn't giving the board presentation the first day. He's giving it the second day. I didn't know he was getting married on the 5th. He didn't tell me, because he knew I wouldn't give a fuck. And so he made it back, like in the movies. He's changing in the car, in the cab, putting his tuxedo on to get to his wedding. Now, if he was German or French or Spanish, he said, I can't make the board meeting. Right?
All the Germans to the right.
Huh?
All the Germans to the right.
Yeah, I understand. You're all here. You're all here. So there are people that still have a sense of commitment. I'm one of those guys. I tell them I was supposed to meet Klaus Kleinfeld in Frankfurt, and I always tell you, short of death, I'll be there. I tell it's kind of my deal. Short of death, I'll be there, no matter what. And I was involved in a near-fatal accident in Cabo San Lucas, where I almost got myself killed. And so I fly to Frankfurt. Vinica Liefau, my lady that ran our Amsterdam office, picks me up at the airport. I'm in a wheelchair, and I can't straighten. I'm all slumped over like this in a wheelchair. And they pushed me into this fancy restaurant the restaurant, the hotel that's attached to the Frankfurt airport, whatever that is.
Sheraton, I think.
Okay, and they shoved me in, and the head of PricewaterhouseCoopers Frankfurt office was there, Klaus was there, and one other guy. I don't remember who the other guy. Maybe the head of the McKinsey guy in Germany. I don't remember. And I mean like this, and. I walk in and Klaus looks at me and he says, "Oh my God, what's wrong with you?" No, don't worry. And I couldn't lift my head up, and so I couldn't make eye contact. So the Germans are talking in German, of course. Winneke speaks German. So as she's pushing me into the dining room, I said, "What are they saying?" He was saying, "Why in the fuck is he here? I mean, he looks awful." And I said, "Okay, it's all right. It's all right." So I get in. Well, I tell you I'm going to fucking be there, I will fucking be there. That's why Klaus just told me, we had dinner a while back, he was coming out with a cold, but he said, I just didn't have the heart to cancel because I know I just couldn't. Now, you don't have that kind of, none of you have that kind of fucking commitment. I was on my fucking deathbed. I was racing dune buggies in the sand. I hit a big boulder. I flipped myself. Of course, no harness, no headgear, none of that. I flipped my two sons. I'm ahead of my two sons in this dune buggy race. And I flipped, this was 1999, April 1999. And I flip over and I land, and the dune buggy lands on me. I shatter my collarbone, puncture my liver, collapse all my lungs, crack my sternum, and I'm bleeding to death internally. I go into and all those stories about hospitals in third world countries are true. So I told my oldest son, Dan, I said, whatever happens, don't let me pass out. I don't want to be passed out in a Mexican hospital. So every time I started to pass out, my dad slapped me. My son, before he slipped that, my son had slapped me to wake me up. So they dragged me into the hospital, and the bones are bursting through my shoulder, blood spurting out all over. And the Mexican doctor stands and looks at me with a couple other nurses and says, I think you've fractured your collarbone. He thinks, you know. I could lean over and scratch my chin with my bone, I guess. And every time I look at your chin, that scar, that's what I think of. Because, you know, in fact, I prop my head up a little. So anyway, I get back, and, you know, I didn't die. But they sent me home. They try to push it together and they patch it up, and I'm home at the Cabo San Lucas hotel, and we're in a villa. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm just in pain. I'm screaming, and I tell my boys, you know, I got to take a piss. So they drag me to the urinal, and I'm pissing solid blood, just solid blood like this. And I said, well, I think I'm dying, boys. And I said, we need a doctor. So we try to get a doctor, English-speaking doctor. We can't do it. The guy, their night porter, or the night guy that's on the desk, had gone missing. Typical Mexican deal. He had gone missing. You know, he wasn't there. So finally, I call American Express. You know, in America, they got these commercials. When in doubt, your life is threatened, call the 800 American Gold number. Okay. Well, I called the platinum number. And I get a Hispanic guy named Garcia. I never forget his name was John Garcia, another Johnny Garcia. And I said, I'm dying here in Cabo San Lucas. I need a doctor. Well, what's your American Express number? I don't have it. It's locked in the safe in a hotel. And I say a few words to him in Spanish. And he says, okay. An hour and 45 minutes later, there was a doctor there. Okay, so I'm a big American Express believer. There was a doctor there, and he said, you know, you're bleeding to death, you know, we got to get you to the hospital, you're in shock, you're in this, and all kinds of shit. Anyway, so 5 days later, I'm there in Frankfurt to see these fucking Hermans. And I had to keep on engaging, trying to get the conversation started, because everybody's just looking at me. You know? And I said, Venica, how do we get these guys to engage? He says they're just all they're in shock. They can't believe it. And I said, this will get them going. That's why you lost the fucking war. You cunts. And that got them going. That's why you lost the fucking war. And that got them going. And that's why you lose the next fucking war. There was information. There's always information on resistance. We already know that. The informal network is as powerful as a formal chain of command, and you get to design your informal network. When you come in and you're trying to make change, there will always be a network of information. You've already got employees, and that's why I say it's much easier to, instead of having to form a new information network or an informal network, it's easier to start over again. It just is. Obviously, if you've got 10,000 employees, it's not easier to start over again. But when you got 10 employees or 20 employees, it's easier to start over again. It just is. Nobody does it, but it's just easier. For all the reasons I've already alluded to, emotional baggage. You can't draft people into change. You have to enroll. You can pull. You can't push. I push this to the extreme because I do push people. Because, for me to take the time to intellectualize, make you understand and agree with me, time, I mean, it takes too much time. Again, then again, I mean, it's easier to start from the beginning. It's easier to start from the beginning. And you know, I say this slightly tongue-in-cheek, you're on the ground, you're ground zero. So, I mean, you can't fall off the bottom. It's not like, you know, it's not like you got a $300 million company, you know, that's been around 25 years. Now, to you and your little mind, you know, you've got a company that's 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, whatever it is. It's a big deal. But in the cosmos of time, it's nothing. You can't start over again. It's not a calling, it's a job, not a religion. Don't confuse a leap of faith with a religious order. I've been accused of being a cult leader a lot of times. Forget balance, create tension. You've got to create tension. And that's exactly what 21st century political correctness says not to do. Exactly. They tell you.
Drive change, right?
Huh?
Tension to drive the change.
Correct. To drive the change, was the impaler, did the impaler care about what anybody thought? Dracula. Did he care about what anybody thought?
I'm sure not.
I'm sure not. I'm sure not. Is that the same as no? He didn't. Okay.
Maybe it's the same as I'm not sure.
Yeah, exactly. No change ever succeeded by dying for his company. You're not a pioneer. You can't change a company without changing yourself. You first, then others. And I've said a lot of times, they don't do what you tell them to do. They do what they see you do. If you work 12 hours a day, you know, they'll work 12 hours a day. And the key is when you hire them. And I know a lot of countries need contracts to hire people. You don't put 32 hours, 35 hours, 37 and a half hours for that's you don't do that. You don't say this is a 5-day job. I try to get away with it. The work hours are whatever it takes to accomplish the goals. So you can be open-ended. And if you're really pressed, well then this is a 60-hour a week job. You can't put 70, 80 hours a week. Courts find that unreasonable. But the courts will, I've been through this, the courts would find 60 hours reasonable.
Unfortunately, in Europe, it's not the case anymore. There's a European Working Hours Directive. And, for example, Clifford Chance obviously had to sign a waiver.
Yes.
You know, but, I mean, the French probably think 35 hours is too much.
Well, I mean, they were trying to get 30-hour work week, weren't they? Or 32-hour work week. Well, the Germans aren't much better than the French about work weeks. But you cannot build, if you're really serious about wanting to build what we've been talking about, you can't do it on 30, 35 hours a week. You just can't. It's impossible. Otherwise, you're going to be 60 years old. You'll be my age. It takes too long. And so that begs the question, and I know you're not going to do it, you don't have those constraints in China. You don't have those constraints in Vietnam. You don't have those constraints in Korea. You've got some constraints in Japan. You do have those constraints in Kaiserslautern, Bremerhaven, Worms. Forget balance, create tax, no change ever succeeded by, you can't change a company without change, Even if the company doesn't change, you will. Change and growth are linked. Which presents a whole other set of problems or challenges or circumstances. You make the change, and you know you've got your head screwed on straight, you're working, you're working your program, and your program's working you. And then you see that you guys will be slow to admit that your people aren't with the program. But even you will ultimately come to the realization, I got to shit or get off the pot. I either got to forget my dream or get rid of some people. And that's a huge chasm to leap over. Big time. Been there many, many times. It's even harder if you got a family, relatives, etc., working for you. But you'll come to the realization. And family and good friends don't come in knowing they're trying to fuck up your dream. They don't do that. Everything starts with great intentions. but the road to hell is paved with good intentions. and they don't do it on purpose, and you don't do it on purpose. But emotionally, it's just harder to sever a relationship that you've had a long time with long-time employees, like, we've heard about. It just is. And Donald Trump does have people that have been there since he was a little boy. But I'm sure that if Mr. Trump were here, and I asked him, are there some of these guys that you'd get rid of? He'd look at me and say, abso-fucking-lutely. If it wasn't so publicized, yeah. And I'm sure his kids that are coming up, as soon as Trump is gone, will axe the fuck out of him. I know you want to say something stupid, so please do it.
Yeah, he fired this woman, Carol. She had been on the show with him, and she got somehow crazy. She wanted more money, and then...
Oh my God, she wanted more money! I can't believe it. And so he fired her.
Yes.
And she'd been there a long time. I didn't see these people. I don't keep track of all this shit, and Donald does a lot of good stuff for charity, and he gives, when Willie Nelson needed to pay taxes and all these people, he helps a lot of people. He does a lot of good stuff. He does quietly. He doesn't, because it would take away from his brand that he's not a rough ass. He's really kind of a good guy in a lot of ways. So, but that would take away from the Trump brand. So he doesn't want that. Research has proven up to 50% of the child's IQ is determined in the prenatal state or by the mother's experience during gestation. I say this because a lot of what we are is genetic coding. Some argue all of what we are is genetic coding. I don't know about that. I'm not a bioscientist. When the Chinese get here, hopefully when they get here, there's one genetic coder in the group, so we can ask them. By the way, they're using bribes. They've been bribing American Airlines people that work at the desk. So they're supposedly on a flight. He says, if you don't hear from me past 9 o'clock, it's because I'm on a flight to Edinburgh. But I told them the money talk. They have money. I said, money talks, bullshit walks. I mean, you find out when the shifts are on, and you find as they're coming into the what do you call it? You give them something. Not out of the view of all the cameras. And finally they did. And gee whiz, they're on a fucking flight now. Like a miracle! So 50%. So you are a product of your social and economic milieu, your social and economic environment, how you were raised. And your parents are the same, your parents' parents, etc., etc. For the most part, you are raising your children more or less the way you were raised, rightly or wrongly, in most cases wrongly. Although and my dad always used to say, I'm doing the best I know how. And an interesting thing, my father's father died before he was born, 3 months before he was born. So being raised, he was under ridicule by his 6 brothers and sisters. You're really the milkman's kid, you're not the brother and sister, yeah. The way kids are really awful to one another. And in 1981, I got an award for the leading Hispanic businessman of the year. And it's up on the walls by my office. And I'm making a big speech at the Biltmore Hotel in Los Angeles, and there was like 2,000 people in an acceptance speech. And about 3 or 4 minutes into the acceptance speech, my dad is sitting in the front row with my stepmother. He starts crying hysterically. And I'm trying to stay focused, and I see him out of the corner of my eye, but I'm trying not to, and he's just sobbing. And I have this thing which I end the seminar with, which I'm not going to steal my thunder. It's a little thing that he wrote me when I was 12 years old, and when I read that, he started crying. So afterwards, he's being interviewed, and there used to be a famous journalist in Los Angeles named Connie Chung. She's a Chinese girl. Chung is Chinese name? Yeah. Anyway, Asian. Anyway, and they said, "Mr. Pena, you must be very proud of your son. What do you attribute his success to?" And he said, looking straight into the camera, "I don't know exactly why. I don't even know anything about how and why he's successful. But I do know one thing. It has nothing to do with me. I was a detriment to my son, and have always been, although I did the best I knew how. That's the truth for your parents too. But my dad admitted it. And he did it again. 10 years later, I got another big award. I made another big speech. And again, Connie Chung. I was honored as the most successful graduate from the California State University Business School. And I made a commencement address to the students. And they asked my father the same question. He answered roughly the same. But then they asked Dr. Shirley Teeter, who was the dean of the School of Business, Dr. Teeter, what is it that you've seen the difference in Dan from the time he was a student to the time he now, 20-some years later? She says, nothing really, but Dan's accomplishments have caught up with his big mouth. This is on fucking national television. National fucking television. His accomplishments have caught up with his big mouth. Yeah.
When
Can you hand me a bottle of water, please?
When did it click within you? When you started throwing aquariums at your teacher, and then starting from one point, making a huge success?
My life turned
your
around.
personal click.
My life turned around. I volunteered for the draft in 1966. During the height of the Vietnam War, and when I went into the military, I might have told somebody this the other night or at dinner. My father said, if you're going to go in the Army, you should be as an officer, not as an enlisted man. Well, I went through OCS, Officers Candidate School, for 6 months. It changed my life. It did. The military has made a lot of men out of boys, and in my particular case, I was 20 years old, and I was responsible for, at the peak, hundreds of lives. And it matured me. It matured me. And then I wanted to get out of the military. Originally, I was going to stay in the military as a career officer, but the Vietnam War started winding down, and I realized, because I was positive I'd be a general someday, and but the war started winding down, so I decided to get out of the military and go back to school. And I went back to school, and I finished 4-year university in 2.5 years. I took as much as 26 units. You normally say 24 units in a year. I took 26 units in a semester. I went to 2 universities simultaneously. I was a great student. I mean, I intimidated the professors. I mean, I'd go in and I'd say, Professor Stefan, I'm going to get an A. If you grade on the curve, everybody else is going to get a D, and I'm going to get an A. Okay. It's going to make all the students unhappy, and you're going to get a reputation for being a shitty teacher. So let's cut a deal. I can write a paper, I can write a book, but I don't have time to come to class because I have 2 or 3 classes scheduled at the same time and day. You already know from my reputation, I was the graduate assistant for the dean, Dr. Baby. You know who I am. So how can I help you be a better professor this semester, this year? So if you write me, I want a 300-page paper on the ins and outs of the psychological and sociological foundations of shite, yada yada, and I want you to be my teacher assistant, and I want you to teach the lab courses. Fine. Go to the next teacher. Go across to UCLA, where I also went to school, kind of similar deal. Or Shirley Teeter was teaching at both schools. Okay, so she was very familiar with my they called it intimidation. I don't think it was intimidation, but I was a good student. I was a great student. And so I got out of school, and I thought I had lost 4 years of my life because I spent 4 years in the military, and so I was in an extra hurry. When I went to Wall Street, because I heard that was where the action was, my boss, my first legitimate boss, as he calls himself, a guy named Bob Donato, who's currently alive. Unfortunately, he's very ill. He's dying now. He used to have the security guard escort me out of the building because I would live in the office 4 or 5 days, same suit, same shirt. I used to wash up in the bathroom, sleep at my desk. And then he would take the security guards and escort me out of the building. He said, go home and sleep for 24 hours. I don't want to see you back for 24 hours. I'd be back in 6 hours. And then I took that focus and I applied it over a 10-year period, the exact same focus. My wife been 10, my ex-wife, we had sex 3 times in 10 years. We had 3 kids. As I told you, she knows the time, the date, the minute, the second our 3 children were conceived. One was conceived in Los Angeles, one was conceived here in Scotland, one was conceived in New York. Because she knows, those are the only 3 times she saw me. Not many people come through the seminar to do that. A few. I had one, Lucinda Burke, L.B. Burke, pre-med student at Cornell, smart as a whip, about this tall. She broke all my records, raising money, doing stuff that I did, and she had a nervous breakdown after 1995, 4 years. She had a nervous breakdown at age 28, 29. But she used to work 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. I used to have to sleep a little. Michael Milken, you know, the junk bond guy, Michael Milken. Michael's a year younger than I am. He's the guy that went to jail, paid $1.7 billion, wrote a check for $1.7 billion to fine. He was with Drexel, Gonsalup, and they said the junk bonds, what he was doing was illegal. They asked him, "How are you so smart?" This is when he was the highest paid guy in the world at that time, and he got paid about $1.3 billion. This was 25 years ago. And they said, "How is it that you're so smart, Mr. Wilken? How is it that you're so experienced?" I'm not. He says, "But I only have to sleep 2 hours a day. I work 364 days a year. The only day I take off is whatever the highest holy Jewish holiday is, Yom Kippur or whatever the high holy day is for Jewish religion, being a Jew. So if you multiply 20 hours a day times 364 days a year, and you multiply times, at that time, 22 years, I'm really 84 years old. So I've got 60 years experience. I'm similar. If you do the maths, I'm really about 109. Because I've worked the 40-hour weeks equal to another 30 or 35 years older than my time. Most of you are just the opposite. You're not really 41. You're not 31. You're 24. You're 30. Because if you take your German lazy ass 30 hours a week times 3.5 days a week, 30 hours a week, the people in New York and Shanghai have a 2 to 3 times advantage vis-a-vis experience in you because they work 2 to 3 times longer. And then you'll say, the German will say, but we work smarter. Which is not true. You work dumber. It's not for everybody, guys. It just isn't. It just isn't, And our friend, our Romanian friend, in Paler 2, he's down there, doing stuff, hopefully legal stuff, in Colombia, seeing Jesus now. Another mentee, it's just like when John Macias became a priest. I bring him into my own fucking house to live and train, and he decides to go to Colombia and see Jesus. Now, that's funny. Too, I hadn't thought about this. Both guys, they turned to religion. I hadn't thought about that until now. They turn to religion. Either that or they have a nervous breakdown like Bruce did. But and only recently do I work a little less than I used to. I still work. I still work long hours. I consider the seminar a vacation for me. This is a vacation. I don't even know why I have to prepare, but I do. I wanted to update slides and do some stuff. But I could do this in my sleep. I could do this out of a wheelchair in a coma. It's because it's rote to me. It's memory.